Secretary of State to speak at a political nominating convention since the end of World War II. Joining us now to understand why that is such a big deal is Susan Rice, who's former UN ambassador, former national security advisor under President Obama. She's the author of Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For. Ambassador Rice, it's nice to have you with us tonight. Thanks for making time.
Good to be with you guys.
Why don't secretaries of state typically participate in events like political conventions?
Secretaries of state are supposed to honor the principle that politics end at the water's edge. And when you go overseas as secretary or as a junior foreign service officer, you're representing the country, not a political party. What Mike Pompeo is doing from Jerusalem is absolutely outrageous. It's an abuse of his office. It undermines the integrity of the State Department. It violates his own rules that he promulgated and is holding every other official in the State Department to but himself. I wish I could say it was surprising. It's a little bit outlandish, but it's all of a piece, Rachel, when you consider that under Donald Trump, the Justice Department has been politicized, the intelligence community has been politicized, every institution of the executive branch has been politicized, and Mike Pompeo is carrying that flag very sadly tonight coming out of Jerusalem.
What about the location here? He has obviously chosen not just to make these remarks at this convention, to be part of this nominating convention, but he has chosen specifically to do it from Jerusalem. And I mentioned that we expect the optics to feature some of the, world-renowned holy sites of the city of Jerusalem. But in terms of the geopolitics here, as well as the religious symbolism, what are the implications there?
Well, Mike Pompeo has been an overtly religious Secretary of State, which in itself is problematic because, again, he's supposed to represent all of America, all of our religions, all of our threads. But he takes this to Jerusalem. And the real import of that is that it places Israel yet again under Donald Trump squarely in our domestic politics, which is not good for the United States, and it's really not good for Israel. Because one of the things that has been so important historically about the U.S.-Israel bond, based on shared interest and shared values, is that it has been bipartisan. It has been unshakable from administration to administration. And by putting Israel and all that entails in the middle of a partisan political convention, it violates that bipartisan faith and trust, and it puts Israel in a very precarious position, when an administration changes, which should never be the case. Democrats and Republicans alike historically have supported Israel's legitimacy and its security and have been very proud to do so. And here we have Israel effectively casting its lot with one political party in this country, which is not appropriate.
So I want to ask you about your comment of politics ending at the water's edge. If you're a foreign leader, haven't you taken the exact opposite lesson out of Trump? I mean, Robert Mueller and the Republican-led Senate Intel Committee found that the campaign welcomed and benefited from help from Russia. The world watched the president get impeached over trying to get Ukraine to help sink Joe Biden, very involved in the domestic goings-ons of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I mean, what does a foreign leader think about that old way of life here? I mean, politics no longer end at the water's edge for Trump.
You're absolutely right, Nicole. And that norm has been violated, like so many others, to an extraordinary degree under Donald Trump's presidency. But in the State Department, which really prides itself on being apolitical, career professionals who are able to work equally for one party or the other without regard to who's in the White House, this is a particular affront. Our diplomats, like our military personnel, like our intelligence personnel, put their lives at risk every day serving abroad, and they do it for our country. To see their leaders essentially violate their oath and align themselves purely on a partisan basis is not only deeply discouraging and demoralizing to the people of the State Department, it sends the message to the world that we've lost our way. And no better way to send that than through the State Department, which is engaging with the rest of the world.
Ambassador, I have a question that sort of kind of pivots off of what Rachel asked, because I wonder, at a time when every administration toward the end sort of makes the go for Middle East peace, so they all claim they're going to. Donald Trump has said this repeatedly, that he thinks this is something that Jared is going to accomplish. But I wonder, what kind of a message does it send to the Palestinian people to have the American Secretary of State speaking atop the King David Hotel with all of those religious sites in the background? One presumes that he's not going to have much to say about them. What should Palestinians take from this? What does it say about the Trump administration's attitude toward them?
Well, I think, Joy, you know the answer to your question. It means they don't care much. But the reason why the United States has been such an important and central player in Middle East peace over the decades is because we have been viewed historically as an honest broker, clearly a close ally and friend of Israel, but also a friend and partner of the Palestinian people, recognizing that their aspirations for this, a state of their own in the context of a two-state solution, makes sense. It makes sense for them. It makes sense for Israel in order for Israel to remain a Jewish and democratic state. And it makes sense for U.S. interests. Under this administration, though, and this is only a symbolic, late game act, but compared to all the other steps they've taken under this administration to take the United States out of the role of honest broker and align ourselves purely with one side in this instance, it may be good domestic politics with a certain segment of the electorate, but it is not smart foreign policy. It doesn't serve U.S. interests in a just and equitable peace in the Middle East. And it frankly doesn't serve Israeli interests over the long term. Because while it may be beneficial, again, in one context in Israeli politics, it violates that bipartisan spirit, and it makes the attainment of a two-state solution, an independent Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with a Jewish Israeli state, all that more difficult to achieve. And if Israel can't remain Jewish and democratic, it can't remain the Israel we know and that the Israeli people want.
Susan Rice, former UN ambassador, former national security advisor under President Obama. It's a real pleasure to have you with us on a busy night. Thanks very much.